My name is Tom Umberg, State Senator from Orange County. California is facing serious threats from the Trump administration. We will treat those threats seriously. When the president says that he's going to interfere in our elections, when the president or his acolytes say that he may run for a third term, I believe him. From the attempts to ignore constitutional term limits to the growing threats of federal interference, California's elections are targeted. We've seen as recently as this week when the president says, based on no evidence whatsoever, that California's elections are fraudulent. We know that he intends to interfere in our election this year. Now, we have the right, in fact, we have the duty, the responsibility to make sure that our elections are conducted freely and fairly, that all those who are eligible to vote have an opportunity to vote in a way that is free from intimidation. We're going to protect our voters. We're going to defend local control. We're going to defend democracy, regardless of whether the federal government chooses to somehow interfere or attempt to interfere. This is a personal issue for me. Every legislator views their responsibility, their job, their legislation through the prism of their own personal experience. My own personal experience in this space was in 1988, and I realized that that was several years ago. But in 1988, I was a federal prosecutor, an assistant U.S. attorney, and my job that day, just by coincidence, I was assigned the responsibility to handle any election issues that might occur, whether a search warrant was needed or some other issue was emergent on that day. And being on duty that day, I got a call early that morning saying that there were police officers that were asking for proof of citizenship of Latinos. I got a call that there were police officers that were intimidating, interfering in the election. Called the FBI, got another call a couple hours later that there were police officers around the district that we were in Santa Ana that were interfering in the election. And finally, I went out with another prosecutor to see what exactly was happening. We went to Santa Ana High, and there was what appeared to be a policewoman with a big sign that said, "Non-citizens may not vote." We watched as a Latina couple approached, at least what appeared to be a Latina couple, and they interacted with that policewoman and turned and walked away. And oh my goodness, that's exactly what's happening. Folks are interfering with the election. We got out of the vehicle. We tried to question the person. They dropped the sign. Turns out those are rent-a-cops. They weren't real police officers. They were rent-a-cops that were placed there by one party, by one candidate, in order to skew the election. And in fact, they were successful. They were successful in skewing that election. That's when Republicans had every legislative office, every congressional office, every supervisorial office in Orange County, and that was the spark that lit the fire that caused me to run for public office. I actually ran against the person that was the beneficiary of that election interference and won. And so here we are today. Facing some of the same challenges, the same threats that we had so many years ago. And that's why I introduced two bills in particular. SB 46, which ensures that if you serve 2 terms as president, you may not appear on the California ballot. And I know that seems obvious to everyone, but apparently it's not obvious to the president and his acolytes that once you've been elected twice, you may not be elected a third time. But in California, if this legislation is enacted into law, and I expect it will be, you may not appear on the ballot after having served 2 terms as president. It also strengthens the protection in terms of our election. What it does, SB 884 says, look it, ICE may not be present at polling places. Federal authorities may not be present at polling places to interfere with the election this year. Now, I'm hopeful that we will send that message in a clear and convincing way so that there are no attempts to interfere with the election. But just in case, that's why we've authored, and that's why I expect to be enacted SB 884. Now, I'm very fortunate to have some folks here with me who are true believers in democracy. Dora Rose with the League of Women Voters, who is the Deputy Director of the League of Women Voters for California. Dora has been engaged in, I think, all things that are right and just in terms of protecting our democracy, and I'm very pleased that she's here with us today. Dora, if you'd like to say a few words. And Darius Kemp also, thank you for being here.
I would indeed. All right. So, morning, everybody. You know, California really stands at the vanguard of American democracy, and the League of Women Voters will never stop fighting to protect what we have built here in California. We protect it alongside Senator Umberg and the other members in this legislature with bills like SB 884, which were just described to you. It draws a zone around polling places where no badge, right? No bullhorn, no federal agent can hover over you while you vote. And we protect it by counting every eligible ballot. You know, our electorate here in California is extraordinarily diverse and it's large. 23 million ballots go straight to 23 million doors. Bill by bill, we have created one of the most open and accessible voting systems in the world. And it's precisely because we invite people into the democratic process, we encourage people to participate in democracy, that we have become a target. We've become a target. President Trump is fomenting lies in California, saying that our elections were stolen, that there is voter fraud afoot. His prosecutor in LA has been launching multiple investigations with no discernible evidence that we can see. They don't have the facts. They don't have the facts, so they're manufacturing fear and they're manufacturing chaos. So let's tell the truth, because that's what we do here. Let's tell the truth. Counting ballot takes time. It takes a minute here in California. We'd like it to go faster. We'd like to resource county elections officials to make it go faster. But a slow count is not a sign that something's wrong. In fact, it's a sign that things are going the right way. Postal Service delays, well, we've seen them, right? We want to give people enough time to get their ballots back in, to mail their ballots on election day, and to get them received. SB 884 adds a few more days to that because we're not seeing those Postal Service delays improve anytime soon. SB 884 adds ballot drop-off boxes so that people can return their ballots securely, confident in the notion that their ballot's going to get into the elections office on time. And when those ballots get received at the elections office, our elections officials take the time that they need to go through every single one. They verify every single signature. They verify every single signature. If there's a problem with the signature, what do? We give people time to correct that problem. Why? Because we want to make sure that every vote, eligible vote, gets counted. And we don't just defend democracy against assaults here in California. We build lasting infrastructure. That's really important to recognize. The Supreme Court, as I'm sure you all know, has gutted the Voting Rights Act. That was the law that helped to end Jim Crow. That struck down literacy tests, right? And poll taxes. All mechanisms designed to prevent Black and brown Americans from voting. Generations bled and died for those voting rights. And 6 justices, in a sweep of the pen, managed to eviscerate them. Here in California, we are doing exactly the opposite. The League is part of a broad-based coalition called the California Democracy Partnership. I urge you to go look them up. We've introduced the California Voting Rights Act of 2026, which will codify all of those federal rights that we are losing here in California. So we protect California voters. That is what the Vanguard does. We don't just defend democracy, we outbuild the folks who are trying to destroy it. Your vote belongs to you. California's elections belongs to California voters. So let's send a message really loud and clear, so that the Oval Office can hear us. Hands off our elections. And I'd like to introduce Darius Kemp, my colleague. He is the Executive Director with Common Cause California.
Thank you, Dora. And thank you, Senator Umberg, for your leadership. You know, Dora just answered all the questions, told all the facts. There's really not more I can say after that. Once again, I hate going after Dora in events like this.
That's why I went first.
Exactly. But I'll tell you a little story about myself really quickly. I was born and raised in Birmingham, Alabama. My mother used to always tell me the story about how when she was a little girl, uh, she couldn't use the bathroom at the Woolworths in downtown Birmingham because Jim Crow was still in effect when she was a little girl. And I'll never forget when I was about 8 years old, she took me for the first time to go and see her vote at the local community center. And I remember her coming out, and I said, "Mom, well, who did you vote for?" And she said, "Well, Jesse Jackson, of course." And I was shocked and amazed that one, voting was that easy, and two, she was voting for a black man because we had never had a black president at that time. And growing up in the South has constantly reminded me, because I know my history, my family has lived that history of voter suppression, of uh, uh, of intimidation of voters. The reason why the Ku Klux Klan existed was partially to intimidate black people from expressing their rights, right? And so now we fast forward to today, where we live in an America where the President of the United States and his acolytes across the country are continuing the same exact messaging that my family grew up with in Alabama, that voting needs to be tested, it needs to be constrained, we need to stop the others from engaging. That's not the California I want to live in. That's not the America I want to live in. And so these bills that Senator Umberg has put forward are important to maintaining California's leadership as one of the fairest states where it is the easiest to vote, where we are constantly checking and verifying voters, where we're making sure that everyone is enfranchised, that they have the right to vote. And if you forgot to register that day, we do in California, you can register and vote the same day. We set up processes that really help and impact everyday people. So it's important that California continue to move forward. We have to progress and not regress. Regression is going backwards in time, back to a 1950 and a 1960 where black people had to show extra identification, where we had to count jelly beans in jars, where we had to guess the amount of clouds in the sky. That's a regression. In California, we are making it easier, safer for citizens to vote. And we are not going to back down on that pledge to make sure that every Californian that can vote, that wants to vote, has the right to vote, and that their vote is counted. And so at the end of the day, I want to thank Senator Umberg and Senator Cervantes and all of the other assembly members and senators in this building who are fighting. Common Cause is a member of the Democracy Partnership as well. We are working on the California VRA of 2026, where I'm asking everyone listening today to go and Google the Democracy Partnership, to go and Google the California VRA of 2026. Learn something about it. Help and support. Engage. Call your representative. Let them know what you want. You want continued fair and free elections in the state of California. You want increases in democracy and not decreases in democracy. And so this is what we are all here for today. And I want to thank you all for joining. I want to thank Senator Umberg again for inviting us. And at Common Cause, we will stand up and fight for you and make sure that your right to vote is protected. Thank you. And thank you, Dora.
Thank you, Darius. Thank you, Dora. Thank you for being here today. But thank you for your leadership in this space for so many years. Really appreciate fighting the fight in terms of democracy here in California and around the country. Also, Senator Cervantes could not be here. She's in appropriations, but important to mention that along with these two bills, there's also SB 73 that makes it illegal for local officials basically to seize ballots and to tamper with the election. And with that, I'd be happy to respond to questions. Yeah. The question was, how do we deal with the rhetoric by federal officials? I don't know. I don't know how we can get the president to say things that are, how we can keep him from saying things that are not true. I mean, for example, this week's election, last week's election in California was free, fair, accurate, with integrity. By saying without evidence at all that there was somehow some rigged nature to it, it undermines democracy and it diminishes the faith in our system. And when you diminish the faith in our system and you diminish the rule of law, what you do is you create not just anxiety, but you also create chaos. So it's very, very worrisome. I am hopeful that by modeling behavior, and we try to model our behavior, that will set an example.
Senator,
Yes, Ethan.
thanks for taking the time. Two questions. Number one, I heard what Dora said about adding days. Can you explain a little bit more about that? The logistical question. Then maybe another logistical question we could add on is the SB 884 on the ICE bill. Is that just like SB 73 an urgency bill? Would you like the governor to sign it before the November elections? You believe it's
Yep.
tropical Senate ICE?
Let me take them in reverse order. Yes, it is urgency, and yes, I do worry about the November election. And then, in terms of one of the ways that has been suggested that one might interfere with our election, not just here but all around the country, is to interfere with the postal service. In California, everyone gets a vote by mail ballot, and if you diminish postal service resources or you change certain regulations of the postal service, that could delay delivery of mail, and that's why we have extra days added on, because the president has done exactly that. Has intimated that there are many ways to interfere with the election.
Senator Umberg, you did mention SB 73, which is Surveillance bill. But is there a concern that there could be potential confiscations, removal of ballots at a data center? It seems like there's already been a couple of dry runs with Chad Bianco down the Riverside, and the thing that's going on in Georgia. Could that be a concern, going into the general election?
Well, the short answer to that is yes, and as you've already illustrated, is that there's a pattern here, and the seizure of ballots. I actually read the warrant that the sheriff used to be able to justify, or actually read the affidavit used to justify the warrant, and it is deficient. Is a nice way of putting it. It's wholly inadequate. And so if you can get a search warrant based on such an adequate affidavit, yes, I worry. I worry about I worry about folks like rogue sheriffs interfering with our election here in California. Yes, and that's what SB 73 is about.
And you would have to have evidence as well, too, to carry out some type of action.
Well, yes. First, you need to allege a crime to get a search warrant. That wasn't done in the warrant or the affidavit for the warrant. And then, secondly, you have to provide evidence based on reliable information that a crime, at least probable cause to believe a crime has occurred. And that didn't happen. But am I worried that you could basically create the facade? I am worried about it. And that's why SB 73 is also an important bill.
My last question, too. I know there's mentioned about the added days. With the current situation with the election process here in California, what are your thoughts about the time that's being put into it to make sure that all of these ballots are verified?
As Ms. Rose said, look, we'd all like the count to be quicker, but more importantly than a quick count is an accurate count. And California takes pride in the accuracy and the integrity of our elections. And so, by virtue of the fact it takes a little bit longer, no one is harmed by the fact it takes a couple of days longer than maybe other places in the country. But lots of us are engaged in democracy because an opportunity to vote by mail exists here in California. Yes.
Question. On count, well, even the governor has expressed frustration at the timing of the vote counts, and he called on counties to expedite the process without dedicating additional resources. So first part of the question, any updates in budget negotiations in terms of allocating those resources? Because the governor said you guys are all working on getting that number established. And two, is it true that really counties cannot, without additional resources,
So I only know what information that you have. I'm not one of the budget negotiators. I understand that that's part of the conversation is additional resources, but I have no inside information as to whether that's forthcoming or not here in the next couple of days. Number two, uh, whether or not that's accurate or not, I only know from my own county, Orange County, we take a great deal of pride in the integrity of our election process. And I do think that they could use more resources effectively. I've actually been down there and seen the count. Those are hardworking people. And could we use more hardworking people? The answer is yes.
Mr. Kim, are you in fear that we could be reverting back to Jim Crow society?
That's a complicated question. Your question here being, am I afraid that we are moving back to a Jim Crow society? And the sad truth is that that is always possible. There have been civilizations throughout time where they thought, oh, we're just going to be on a trajectory of constant progression and constant growth. And things happen. I'm fairly sure in the 1920s, maybe Germans never thought that their country would be the way it turned out, and in various other places around the world. But at the end of the day, anything is possible. It takes vigilance. We as a society and a community need to have strong values. We need to know what those values are. We need to have strong rule of law. We cannot have renegade elected officials or presidents doing things outside of the law. It's stoking a doubt within the systems or any other kinds of violence or other kinds of stochastic terrorism at the end of the day. So it's always possible, but I believe in the people. I believe in people like Senator Umberg. I believe in people like Dora Rose. I believe in the fighters. I believe that there are more than enough good people in California and throughout the United States that do not want to go back and regress into a Jim Crow style America. I think we want to progress into a better future where Americans and Californians are all able to vote, able to engage proactively in our democracy and in our society without the fear of violence or intimidation or anything of that nature. And also, I just want to point out it's important that we protect immigrants and people who aren't citizens, right? So could we move back? Sure, it's possible, but I don't think so. Not with the strong fighters that we have, not just here in California, but across the country.
So, okay, last question. Unfortunately, I've got to actually catch a plane. So, yeah.
Okay, last question. Thanks. One more question, just about the threat of ICE, and if the bill passes, do you think President Trump could still try to send in ICE in November, even if the bill is passed and signed?
Do I worry about that? Yes, I worry about that. The president does not seem to be constrained by the law. And so if we pass the law, it does give us a tool to make sure that ICE and other law enforcement do not interfere in our election in November. So thank you very much. Appreciate it. Rachel is here. If you've got other questions, you can direct them to her, and she'll find the right people to answer. Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you, dearest. Thank you. Very nice. You guys are great. We got some other press conferences.